welcome tonight. Thank you for coming. I know 6 o'clock is early when you're trying to get home from work and things organized and children fed, and it's a real effort to come at 6. So thank you very much for being here. I'm Linda Hitchings. I've met many of you, at least in passing, and I am the literacy coach here. Please feel free always, as the years go by or the semester and year goes by, to contact me with any questions you might have. Just as your child is taking on reading and writing. Tonight we're just going to go through some of the things to expect as they're learning to go from non-readers looking at pictures and talking about pictures to actually reading chapter books. And so it's going to be that whole period of time. Just a quick question, how many of you have children who are in kindergarten? All right, and in first grade? And in the kindergarten and in second grade? Second grade. All right. I just wanted to get a proportion so I can hit, everybody, but also because it's also nice to know where they're going and not always right where they are. So there we go. Nope. Need to go back. I'm getting used to the clicker. There. So what does it mean to read fluently and how to get there? So that's what we'll talk about tonight. The first slide is really talking about what a difference it makes to read with your child every single night. Now, obviously in kindergarten, they're not reading. And so in kindergarten and first grade, it looks a little bit differently. And there, remember, and I'll get to a slide later about this, but for them, reading is looking at the pictures and talking about the pictures. One of the first things we do with our kindergarten students is have them look at a picture and tell us what's going on in the picture. Typically at the beginning of kindergarten, the child will say there's a tree. The picture is about children playing, and it really doesn't have much to do with a tree. But they'll just name things because that's what they did when they were younger. But as they get better reading pictures, saying what's going on in the story, well, yes, there's a tree, but there's a ball in a playground. Oh, please come in. We just started. This is about children playing. This is a huge connection. So their ability in kindergarten to be able to look at a picture and just talk about that is actually reading. So even though they're not reading words, you pulling out a book and having them look at the pictures, just one even, every single night, and say, what's going on in this picture? And when they say tree, you can just take it from there. Yes, there's a tree, and look at all these children playing with the ball. What do you think they're doing? And so that's an enormous help for even your pre-readers. That's going to get them ready for reading. As they get up, you're going to find that the teachers are going to ask as early as first grade that your children are reading every night for 15 or 20 minutes. Again, if they're just starting to read, talking about the pictures and hearing you read is enormous. Hearing the language, hearing book talk, because the way it's written in books and the way we speak is different. And so that is all really helpful. So this 20 minutes a night or 15 minutes a night, when they're not actually reading yet, and you're reading to them and talking about the picture, is still reading and is still helping them. As they get to read more, at the end of first grade, every single student in this school was reading 69 words per minute or more. That's at the end of first grade. So this here is going to be happening in first grade, second grade for sure. If you, just for 15 minutes a night, have them read just for 15 minutes, they're reading 438,000 words in a year. That's a lot of practice. If they're reading 120 words per minute, which is what our third graders are doing, they're reading 657,000 words a minute. So when we say read 15 minutes every night, my first thought was, well, that's not very much. But it is. It makes a difference. So when you have busy lives, especially if you have older children and you're bouncing hither and yon, finding that 15 minutes is really important. The other thing that's helpful with this, especially for the young ones, and this is just gold, having that routine. Now when they're young and they still pretty well do what they told, not always, they've learned the no word, but they're going to do what you ask. To find that time in your schedule where you can do this every night is huge. Because when they're 5 and 6 and 7, they're not learning so much through their head as by doing things. And that habit, even if you're just looking at a book and talking about the picture, they know it's dinner time. This was in my family. It was right after dinner because they were just done after school. They needed playtime. So they would play, and we'd have dinner. And then right after dinner, they'd be at the table. I'd still be cleaning some things up, and that was the time. And it was just non-negotiable. Nothing else happened. Nobody else turned the TV set on. It was just the time we all were doing what we needed to do. And of course, whatever that was changed as the years go on. And that is still my daughter's habit, and she's 24. And it's just, when you can do it then and get that routine, the payoff comes later. So that routine's huge. And the other huge thing you can do, even when they're not reading much, is have conversations with your child. Talking with them, and not just pass the butter and pass the peas and put your toys away, but this back and forth conversation. Tell me about playing in the sandbox. What were you playing? And then they try to describe it. Oh, was there somebody with you? No. Or talking about things in their day where it goes back and forth. This you talk, me talk, you talk, me talk on one topic helps them learn to write, which is interesting. So your conversations, these rich conversations that you can have with your children, even before they're reading, is an enormous background for them. Supper time's, of course, the best time. So make sure the TV's not on at the dinner table. And then hearing you talk amongst yourselves. Doesn't matter what language. It's this conversation, them hearing you use adjectives, them hearing your tone of voice. And it gets them ready to predict stories. They're hearing what you did during the day, and then that's going to be familiar in a book. They might hear you being happy, they might hear you complain a little bit, but that's what they're going to see in stories. And they're going to bring all of that with them. So those things, establishing this routine and establishing conversations, is really, really important, even before they're reading chapter books. One of the things we do, I just give them in kindergarten this sentence that they read back to me. The hardest one is something like, the shopkeeper sold my mom some fresh cream. This was fascinating. Oh,
Shutting down?
yes, this is
I got it.
because it's 6 o'clock. It's the 6 o'clock
I
shutdown.
had the warning, but 6
Well,
o'clock passed, and I thought, well, maybe it won't happen.
Oh, yes, it's a little past it.
I'll get it there, you keep
Oh,
going.
that's fine. So at any rate, in kindergarten, when I give this to the children, most children cannot say that back to me perfectly. That simple sentence. By the end of kindergarten, they're good at it. If they're not hearing your conversation and having to pay attention and hold on to it, they're not hearing what the teacher's saying. So that ability to listen that you're establishing at the dinner table, before they're even reading or while they're reading for the rest of their lives, even though they pretend they're not listening, they do hear you, I promise. My children have concurred that even in high school, they still heard me, even though they pretended they didn't sometimes. But that level of being able to hold on to it is helping them be able to listen to the teacher, which means all of that conversation the teacher's having to a group, they're able to get. And if not, if they have a hard time listening to you and having a conversation back and forth, they're missing the entire instruction the teacher's giving. And that's a big part of the day. So, and I'll be able to pull up that when it comes up to the screen. So, let's see. The next slide, and there is on your tables, this is the PowerPoint here, and you'll get to take that home. And there's a handout, 3 different handouts there that you can have. But the 3 things that research has said that really helps your children to learn to read most quickly. The first one is actually access to books. So just having books in your home is the single most important thing for your child to be a better reader. They did a lot of research, families that have 500 books in their house or 100 books in their house or no books in their house. Just physically having books stimulates them to read and to have that access, again, even if they're just looking at the pictures and it's an adult book, an appropriate book. Just looking at the pictures, they're still reading. So the first thing is access to books. The second thing is they have some choice. Now that doesn't mean they get to choose anything. So it's an educated choice that we're helping them do. So if they have, instead of the entire bookshelf, and you say pick out a book, and you know how they always go to the same one all the time? But if you say, well, tonight you want to read this book or this book, that's enough of a choice. When they have a choice, they kind of buy into it. It's like, oh, I get to do what I want to do. And the brain starts doing different things. They've actually done studies, and the excitement in the brain, they're just more ready to learn. Why? Because they got to choose it. Not from everything, but from two good choices. So that's something, that's the second most important thing to helping them read, is giving them a little bit of an educated choice. And the third one is what we call good fit books. And on your table, there's two different things that describe how we pick a good fit book. In kindergarten and first grade, it's hard for the parents, because at this point, the children are learning, step by step, and the books are really fit for their level. And I can come around now. I'm just going to get the PowerPoint back up. Oh, it's still spinning. See it come back up. And so the Good Fit book, this is the other thing that surprised me, because I worked with kindergarten and first graders for 15 years. Hold on. And when you teach in the classroom, there we go, almost there. So when you're teaching in the classroom, sometimes you're always, oh, sorry. Yes, it's, there you go. The children sometimes fall in between, so you might have a group that's at a level 6, you might have another group that's at a level 10, and I'll show you what the difference is there. And then this child's in between. And so with that, it's hard, because my tendency used to be, well, I'll support them and give them the harder book. What I found, and what my students taught me, was if I gave them the easier book and gave them a lot of them at the easier level, they progressed more quickly than if I gave them the harder book with a lot of support. And I didn't, please take your time, and there's things here. Just, yeah, no, this is, all these seats are for you.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And so that surprised me, because I thought, oh, it's going to be better if I make it a little bit harder. But the opposite was true. They learn more if the books are a little easy. The reason is, and my students taught me this, they proved it because I didn't believe it. The reason is, instead of just thinking about what the words are and trying to sound them out, they're actually thinking about the meaning, the picture, the syntax, decoding the words, the first letters. Because it's easy enough, they're only working on 1 out of 10 words instead of every other word. And I think we're back.
Back one.
Oh, no, this is good. This is good. Thank you. So, and so they have to have that mixture of all these different things. These are the things that they're going to be doing even before they're coming to school, reading the pictures, that you're looking at the print. I had a student one year who couldn't learn to read, and then we found out they thought you started here and went backwards. When we just said, oh no, here, it's this way, then they took off. But we had to figure that out. And this part too, where they're really pointing. And I know, in the early levels, what they're going to do sometimes is go, oh, this book is good. I see the red cat, I see the blue cat, I see, and they're not looking. That doesn't really count. So even when it's memorized, because they're smart, as long as they're pointing and looking at the words, that's still getting in there and it's helping them to read. So that's where this one-to-one matching comes in. That even if they've read the book several times, and that's good, because that builds up fluency, we want them to read it more than once. We don't want them to read like that. We want them to read so it's interesting, even when they're young. So to read it more than once, these poems that are coming home are phenomenal. As long as they're looking, even if it's memorized, they're still noticing something. So we'll go from these beginning books into something that's like a level 3 or a level 4. Here, very repetitive. My birthday cake has a red candle, my birthday cake has a yellow candle. They have it memorized, they're pointing one-on-one, but there's always one page that's different. And so unless they're really looking, they're not going to get that page. So when they get to this point, they can still remember the story, but there's going to be one page where they have to work. Between this and a level 4, which is just one little micro step up, you're getting into stories. I can see my brother, he is riding his bike, or this one, where it's still very simple, but the pages are different. So there's different text on each page. They can be stuck here for a long time. I've had students not move off of these levels for months because they're not really learning, not really looking. So this is where those sight words come in. To get to the next place, this is the first place they get stuck. To get over this first hump, they have to learn some sight words. So in first grade especially, you have fry lists that have come home. Mrs. Bloss, where is it? Or Mrs. Palmwriter just showed me these one breath boxes where they try to say all of these words without taking a breath in this box. And it goes through, these are the fry words. On one of the handouts in the back are the first 600 sight words. I want to tell you just a little bit about those. Those 600 words are not, and it's on this handout that's stapled, and they're in the back. Those are not the easy words you see in basal readers like I and we and dog and mom and dad. Those words are the 600 most commonly used words in English print. In newspapers, encyclopedias, magazines, children's books, novels, everything. So if children learn those first 600, and our goal is that every child knows those first 600 by 3rd grade, every time they read, they will know 60 to 70% of the words they're reading. So that much is fluent, and we know that they will never have to work on 60% or 70% of the words they're reading. There's a lot of others in there that are going to know too. And so we're paring it down so that children are only having to figure out a few words. And that's very important. So the fry word lists that come home, the little books and the poems that come home in 1st grade, in kindergarten, I don't think the sight words are coming home yet. We're doing letters and sounds, but that's coming. Those will really help because they're words they're going to see every time they read. So time you spend, and just a little bit, get a few flashcards. If it's hard for them, do 5 they're good at, and add 2 they don't know. When they get those 7, add 2 more. When they get those 9, add 2 more. So you don't have to give them 100 words and then they miss and they miss and they miss. That won't help. Get the ones they know and then slowly start adding more. And it will just speed up the whole process, and they'll be able to read a lot more words when they come across them in books. As you get to emergent readers, it's okay to memorize as long as they're pointing. This is something that you don't want to cover the picture. Sometimes parents will say, well, if I cover the picture, they can't read, or if I point to a word, they can't tell me what it is. They can't at this level. And that's all right, because what we want them to do is not just learn a dictionary full of words. It's impossible. We want them to orchestrate it. We want them to predict the picture. and use the word, the fact that they know the and I, so they already have 2 words in it, and that it makes sense, and that it looks right quickly. And so if you take the cues away, they're only relying on one thing. They're only relying on letters. And that is the slowest way to read. Yes, we can teach them to read that way, but it's the hardest way to learn to read. So learning the phonics and learning to say the sounds, yes, that's in there when you come to a word you're stuck on. And even then, we're trying to have them find words inside that they know. So if they know can, I love it when they do this, had candlelight up there on a big, big long word. And I said, what word do you know in there? She goes, can, oh, candlelight. Read the whole thing. Of course, instantly. And so we don't read in little bits. We read in chunks. And so you don't want to cover pictures up. That's really important. They're learning one-to-one match and then doing all of these 3 things together. This is where I'm saying they get very stuck at this point. Level 5 is very predictable. I have some examples. Kindergarten's all about looking at the words, following word by word, and starting to use the beginning letters and the meaning to predict. Both things simultaneously. You may be getting poetry from your kindergarten and your 1st grade teachers and some of the 2nd grade teachers. This is huge because it's developing rhythm. You want them to read it many times. If it's a hard poem, you read it, they read it. You read a line, they read the same line. You read it together. They start it, you start it. Don't make it fun. Make this 15 minutes that you're with them, you don't want to fight for the next 13 years. Make this enjoyable, make it easy. So if they're struggling with it, do it with them. You read the page and then they read it after you. You'll have another chance to read it tomorrow. You don't have to fix every mistake. In fact, when we teach, we have them read the whole book. We'll know they made 6 mistakes on it. We'll pick 1 for them to fix. Because you see, if I show them every word they missed, I've just done half the work for them. I have shown them their mistakes. We want them to know where their mistakes are. So if they read the whole little book, and they're not long, that you get to borrow, or the poem, they're little, and they made 6 mistakes, and I'll say, well, you did a really good job on this page. I can see my dad. He is raking the leaves. It says digging the garden. And I'll say, oh, that makes sense. It could be raking the leaves. And I might say, what would you expect to see at the beginning of a raking? And they'd go, R's. Is that an R? Well, what else do you notice? Oh, he's digging. Let's check. And so we might fix 1 like that, just 1. That took, 30 seconds? And you're helping them. And then the next day they get the same book out and say, you know how you fixed that digging? Yesterday there was another place where you said a word that didn't start with the right letter. I'm going to see if you can find it today. That's their challenge. And then they really look. And so then they're responsible for trying to find it, and they're responsible for trying to fix it. And over 6 days, if you have 6 mistakes, you can do a different one every day, and they're still getting that practice. So don't feel like you have to stop on every mistake. We want them to read beginning to end very fluently, and then just pick 1. And trust them the next day that they're going to get another one. With your help, with not, either way is fine. So the poetry, they're going to be developing it over time. So as they get into the higher books, you have to trust the books that the teacher's sending home. These are very research-based books. They go up a little bit, little bit, little bit, little bit. And what happens is, at a certain point, the pictures become less helpful. They're there, but they're entertainment. So unlike before, where they're helping them to read, now they're just there because kids like pictures and to have that space there. Sentences are getting longer, words are getting smaller, more words on the page, more complex sentence structures. So going through the leveled books will naturally help them. You don't have to worry about covering the pictures. This books that they're getting is going to do that for you. So that you don't have to worry. So here, variety of words, less repetition, smaller words, pictures don't help. They're using, this was a fun one, they tend to use the beginning letter to check, then they get really good at that, and then they look at the end. They completely skip the middle. 95% of the time, if they check the beginning and the end, they get the word right. And then they say, oh, sounded funny, didn't sound right, didn't make sense. Then they check the middle. And that's the fastest way. So they do it naturally. And integrating all of this so it's fluent. So this is really kindergarten and first grade, huge. That's basically what they're doing in kindergarten and first grade. Grade 1, reading many books at their level. These are little itty bitty books. Problem, there isn't a single book in this library that it's at a real first grade level. Libraries start at second grade. All those picture books, they're made for adults to read to children. They're very hard to read. I mean, there's some that are designed for children, but most of them, actually, the text is quite hard. So in kindergarten and first grade, until they're really fluent and at what we call a level 20, and that's getting into these intermediate books like Father Bear Comes Home, these little chapter books. Okay? This is an end of first grade, beginning of second grade. So until they get to here, nothing in the library is at their level. So going to the library is still you reading to them and you reading with them. Second grade's wonderful because this whole world, this whole beautiful world in here opens up. And then they take off. And so getting them to that point where we have this whole room available to them is enormous. And that's what kindergarten, first, second, and second grade's all about. They're checking all the parts of the word. They're working on flipping the vowel, like bread, B-R-E-A-D, it should be breed. Right? If you do the rule, two vowels go walking, the first one comes a talking, should be breed, or great, G-R-E-A-T, should be greet. So they're having to learn, if the first choice doesn't work, to try a second one. They're learning the sight words, especially the fry. So that's first grade. I like this one. I'm just going to let you try to read it. Can you read it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can read it. Yeah, you can. And that's what I'm saying. If the first and the last is there, you're using other things to read. And so we have to synthesize the whole thing. Because if you tried to sound this out, of course, it would be a disaster because it wouldn't make sense. But it's not even how we look at words. So that's why it's important to orchestrate all of this, because this, you can see, we read by looking at parts and checking, not going letter by letter. This is the golden time. When they can, and what we call fluency. Fluency is when they're reading reasonably quickly, which means they can decode. That their ability to figure out those words is automatic. There's two parts of reading, and boy, do they get stuck on this in fourth grade, so I'm going to warn you now. One part of reading is being able to figure the words out. That's kindergarten and first grade. What's this big word here? What's this little word here? That's decoding. Can I read the words on the page? The second part is actually understanding what you're reading. If they're not reading quickly enough, if they can't decode quickly enough, if they're not reading with expression, pace, if there's not a story going in their head where they're reading expressively, they're not thinking about the meaning. And they get stuck in third grade. Not literally. But they think that reading words is reading. I had a student, and he was stuck for 1.5 years. We couldn't figure out why, because he was really trying hard. And so he was reading 160 words a minute with no mistakes. Zooming through. And I looked at him and I said, You read a lot of words really fast. You're good at that. I want you to stop practicing reading fast. Your job now is to read slowly enough that you can remember. He looks at me and goes, oh, he went up a grade level in 2 months. And so they have to get this in-between place from where they're learning to read the words and learning to read them quickly, the sight words, putting, a big word, establishment in front of them and then being able to figure it out, to remembering what they read. 2nd grade, big thing in 2nd grade. 2nd grade's the beginning of this bridge to true fluency. That's where they can read easily and automatically, and where they remember what they read. What your child's going to be asked to do in 2nd grade a lot is being able to read something at their level, fiction or nonfiction. Be able to say the main idea. This story is about a boy who lost his dog and how he tried to find him. Then tell us 3 to 5 things from the beginning, the middle, and the end of the story, because they tend to just remember the parts they liked, in order, using some exact words from the text. And it's a big challenge. So it's this developing memory that's really important. For gifted kindergarten and 1st graders, they get very good at decoding. I can put sometimes I was reading with someone recently, put a 4th grade book in front of them, 100% accuracy, just tooling right along. What was the story about? And that's not unusual. In kindergarten and 1st, some students learn to read, to do the decoding part very fast. Interestingly enough, that part where the brain's still in concrete operational, if you know psychology, they still need to touch and feel and experience things. The abstract part isn't developed so much yet. They just have to mature. I used to sit there I'd have a kindergartner who would come in on the first day of school and be able to read chapter books. Perfectly. I worked with him for a year and he still couldn't remember what was going on in a story he read perfectly. Even a simple one. But about midway through the next year, he could read entire chapter books and tell me everything. The brain just has to grow up. So if you have a child who's an early decoder, let them read, let them enjoy it, let them enjoy getting all those words. That's great practice. Ask them a little bit what the story's about, but don't be surprised if they can't tell you much. It's all right. Now, if they're in 3rd grade and they can't tell you much, you need to talk to them. But in kindergarten and 1st, it's a brain development thing. So don't panic, don't worry. Just let them read, ask them what it's about. Whatever they can tell you is great, and it'll get better fairly quickly. And they work on that in 1st grade as well, in an appropriate way. So getting them to get better at that. If they're making a lot of mistakes, again, don't interrupt. Just let them read it. Praise one thing they did really well after they read the book. Fix one error. If you fix every word, they're going to hate reading with you. And you don't want that. You really don't want that. If they can do every single word, they can figure it out, but it might take a long time. In other words, they know how to decode. It's not fast. We want it automatic. That's where it's read, reread, reread. Do it a lot. Read the same thing. You read it so they get a feel of what it sounds like. They read the same thing back. Rereading familiar things is huge. Have fun with it. You can have a talent night where they get to show off. You can put closed caption on your TV where the words come off on the bottom, and research says just by having those words script on the bottom of your television set, their reading goes up. Oh. Yeah, because they're seeing it and hearing it at the same time. You don't even have to do anything. Yeah, you've done that for me. Yeah, for you too, learning another language. Books on tape, but now we have book flicks. These are accessible through a library. The teachers will give you access so they can have all sorts of books at home on the internet where it highlights the word as it's saying it, hugely speeding up. And we're seeing incredible changes just by this coming out in the past year and being available. So check out our website and talk to your teachers about how you can access this at home. We talked about this, the early decoders. Sometimes they can read words in 3rd grade. Remembering's hard. This is normal. This is developmental. You have to encourage reading, but be very careful to build the memory. Cherish what they do well. Validate what they do well. If they're reading words, they're learning a lot. And this is really important. The strategies the teachers are teaching, even if they're using, tiny big wave and the seagull to teach it, the same strategy, the teachers are using the same strategy in 1st grade that they're doing in 5th grade. The strategies themselves don't change. If I need to understand the book, I need to understand this book, and I need to understand my biochemistry book when I'm in college. It's the same strategy. What do you do when you don't get it? So even though a child might be reading a harder book or even an easier, or not be at the same level that the teacher's reading with the class as a whole, which is average, the strategies they're teaching work for every book. And so encourage your child to remember, and that's hard in kindergarten and 1st grade, read your children's parents' notes home to see what they're working on, and do it at the level of book they're at. Whether they're reading at an easier level because they're still decoding, whether they're reading at a higher level because they've learned decoding. The strategy's the same. Making mental images. Okay, what do you see? Where are the characters? Where are they standing? What do their faces look like? Are they happy? Are they sad? Are they angry? Make a picture. That's one strategy. So there's many of them, and knowing what that is applies to every single book. So this is important. 6th grade ALPS teachers are doing the same strategies. They're just doing it at college level books or high school level books. So don't underestimate the power of these strategies, because it's the books that change, not how we read. Building memory, it's brain development. When the brain's matured, they'll think more abstractly. Retelling is a huge 2nd grade goal, which I said earlier. Retelling is a very big deal in 2nd grade and 3rd grade. If they cannot do this in 3rd grade, they're going to have a hard time. That's the 2nd time, one when they get past this level 3 and 4, when it's not repetitive. The 2nd time they not stop learning, they never stop learning. The 2nd time they kind of flatline and it doesn't seem like they're moving anywhere is 3rd grade, because they have to remember it. 3 to 5 things from the beginning, the middle, and end in order. This one our students taught me. I was just talking to an IU professor today. They have not done research on it. They're thinking about doing it. She said she got goosebumps when I told her. I found in 4th grade for some of the readers who were struggling. So they could not remember the story. I was reading with them every day. Someone was reading with them, one-on-one, every day for 30 minutes. And we weren't moving. And one day, I looked at a boy. I will remember him forever for what he taught me. And I said, well, who's in the story? He goes, Jack? Yeah, there's a Jack. Who is Jack? The granddad? Jack was the dog. Now, can you imagine if you think Jack is the granddad and he's really the dog, how that you can't possibly understand the story? He taught me that if I tell him before he reads, first thing I'm going to ask is who's in the story and what's their relationship. So I taught him to do that in 5 seconds. As soon as he did that and read the next story we had, who are the people, their proper names, not the man, their proper names and their relationships, he went up a grade level in 30 minutes. He had all the skills, his brain just wasn't organized. We gave him that tool and it was like, everything fit in place. So when, again, the strategy, who's in the story? What are the names of the characters? This was the single most important thing for them to remember in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, what was going on in the story. It's an easy fix. Most children will do that naturally, but if they don't naturally do that, you help them do it. What the setting is, where it is. In 6th grade, they start bumping around where it's here and then there and then here and then there, and that's confusing in some exact words. Coming up in 3rd grade, can they read out loud and retell? Can they read it in their heads and still tell me about it? When they're first starting to read silently, they usually drop a whole grade level. When if they read out loud, they'll read at 3rd grade. If they read in their head, I have to drop it down to 2nd. They have to get as good at reading silently as they have to do reading out loud. Can they listen to you read and tell you what happened? And I will tell you right now, I will fail them. I am a bad listener. I have to take notes. They aren't necessarily, you compensate for what you're not good at when you get older. Can they do all these things and understand? I'm going to fly through some of these next slides so that you can answer questions of some of the teachers that are here. On the handouts, our library, Mrs. DeLiso, is phenomenal. She has one of the best library websites in the country. We had someone from California come here and decide to volunteer at our school because of her website that she saw in California. One of the things that's on there is as they get older and they start taking these NWEA steps, you'll get what's called a Lexile. So once they're in 2nd grade and this whole library starts opening up and they can check out books, she has a place where you can type in their Lexile when you find that out. Type in the kind of book your child is interested in, and it will tell you the books in this library on their level. And so then it helps them pick books out, and she can help them do that here. If your child has a hard time, because remember the first and most important thing, access to books. Them having these books from the library home, make sure they get the library books back or that you pay a fine if it's lost so that they can continue to check those books out, because that's really important. So she has all sorts of books lists, you know, things that the other children really like, what's popular right now. So many things on here, very rich. I will eventually, again, have a website for literacy. We're changing our webpage, so that's hopefully coming along the pipe. I had all my old newsletters on the last one, so we're changing that over. 3rd grade, I read. How many people know about this test? A couple of nods. Okay. In 3rd grade, in the state of Indiana, they have a must-pass test. It's in 3rd grade, your child has to be reading at a certain level. If they're not, then they will stay in 3rd grade reading the next year. They can have 4th grade science, they can have 4th grade math, but they, by state law, they have to stay in 3rd grade until they are at that level. Now, I don't mind, I love challenge, and that's fine because I think we should have a standard that we want our children here. But it is a very high stakes test. And if they don't do well on it, they can take it again. We have summer school, and so they get another shot at it. But if they don't pass it that 2nd time, they're in 3rd grade reading for the next year so that they can pass it. So we really want to get this 3rd grade reading down. We're watching very carefully for that, starting in kindergarten and 1st grade, all the way through. This is on the Department of Education's website if you want to see the kinds of questions that are on there. You can just follow those links. Again, I took it through our website and they're changing that, so I hadn't looked to see if these still work. I should have done that and I didn't. And this is what we're doing here. Powerful classroom instruction, supporting the educators so that they're doing focused professional development. The teachers here are phenomenal. It is such a privilege to work here. First of all, they work very hard and put in many extra hours, but that aside, they devour what's good for kids and really can tell you what's good for them. I'm here with, we now have 5 preventionists working to help your children. Everybody gets 30 minutes of small group instruction on what they need in reading and writing every day. A lot of collaboration, that's that late Wednesday. Without that late start Wednesday, and that is what's helping us really know your students and really being able to help them. So we thank you for that extra hour you give us on Wednesday when they're at home. Intervention teams that are helping, giving additional support for students who are a little bit below grade level. Constantly monitoring, and then a really good summer school model. And lots more. And the last one. I'm going to have another seminar like this in February on writing. But now I want to give an opportunity. We have in the back